was like, what do you mean they bombed us? He said, they just bombed the World Trade Center. He had media badges, New York media badges. And so we put those on and we jumped on bicycles and went down to the scene. And so I round the corner and I saw this, everything was lit up and oddly sparkling. And my first impulse was, wow, so beautiful. And then I just was hit with like, what did I just say? I can't call this beautiful. Like, how careless of me to call such a horrific incident where there's people, women going around with flyers with pictures of their husband. Have you seen my husband? I know he's alive. Tell me if you've seen him. And I'm calling this beautiful. I could see what I couldn't see before. And that was the beauty. Like, men and women are here. Everyone was told how dangerous the air is. No one left. We know now that the chances of finding a survivor is very slim. At the very slight chance that they could save one human life, these 2,000 men and women are risking their own life. And I said to myself, this is who we are. This is who we are.
Front row dads. Hey, it's Hal Elrod standing in for the one and only John Vroman today. And it is my great pleasure and honor as a front row dad myself to be introducing you to one of my good friends and one of the most intentional fathers and just human beings that I know, that I've ever met, Mikki Willis. In case you are not familiar who Mikki is, he is a father and an independent investigative filmmaker. And after digging for survivors under the rubble of the World Trade Center in 2001, Mikki experienced an awakening that reshaped his life and profession. And since then, his productions have been used to correct divisive narratives about historic events and as key evidence in major international court cases. His most recent production, the Plandemic film series, is the most seen and censored documentary series of all time. We don't talk much about that film series until the very end, but I will tell you, I just watched the third installment. It's called The Great Awakening, and I believe it is a must-see film for all of us. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking today about how Mikki parents his kids. Now, Mikki is a filmmaker. So screens are a part of Mikki's life. And so we talk about how he navigates limiting screen time, managing screen time, and how to just create dialogue with his kids. One of the things that you'll hear today with Mikki is just, again, he's one of the most intentional parents that I've ever met. And he has real critical conversations, thoughtful conversations with his kids to really empower them to be critical thinkers themselves. You'll hear how he talks about the rare occasion that he ever says to do something and he follows it with "because I told you so" or "because I said so." He always explains to the kids why he's sharing that and what the consequences are. And he's really empowering. And I know his two boys, Azai and Zuri, and they are two of the most thoughtful, intentional young men. And that's a reflection of their father, Mikki, and of course their mother, Nadia, who you'll hear a little bit about today. But it is my great pleasure, Front Row Dads, to introduce you to my good friend for many years now, and one of the most intentional front row dads I have ever met, the one and only Mr. Mikki Willis. Enjoy. Mikki Willis, we are here again. How are you doing, buddy?
I am doing fantastic, Hal. It's great to see you, my brother.
Dude, first I have to pick a bone with you. I wasn't going to do this, but it just came through me, which is you were invited to our 4th of July party. I got a text like a couple days before, "We're not coming. We got a better offer." You didn't say that, but that's of course how I internalized it. So we missed you on 4th of July, man.
Yeah, we had to really, look at the list of invites and just determine who is the most famous person who's invited us to the 4th of July.
Damn it. I get it. I get it.
On top of the list, Hal. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm going to keep working. That gives me motivation to work harder. I'm going to work harder. My goal is by next year's 4th of July party that I've sold enough books, got enough fame. I'm on the top of the list. Man. Yeah. Hey, man. So this is for everybody listening, this is our second time doing this. We recorded a 90-minute podcast. We had a 90-minute conversation a few weeks ago. And there was a tech issue and my half did not record. So it was just you talking into the ethos the entire time.
My half was perfect, by the way.
Your half was perfect. You looked perfect. Your hair was perfect. Your teeth, as they are now, are perfect. Yeah, man. No, but it was a bummer, but it's also A, we get to do it again. Yes. And B, we get to do it even better, right? So
can you be better this time?
Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah. It did take me a long time last time to get around to what we were trying to get to, which I tend to be long-winded and not get straight to the point. But let's get to the point. So actually, I want to take just a minute to I want to mention a couple of things. So in your early life, you were an actor and model. You are now, in fact, you were model of the year, voted model of the year by the Modeling Association of America International in 1990, which does two things. One, it says you must be really good looking. Two, it says 1990. How old is this guy? So couple of thoughts there.
I was a Gerber baby.
Yeah. How old are you, by the way?
56.
You're 56, dude. Okay. You are one of those folks. You do not look, I would take it literally a decade off if I was guessing your age. I should have guessed first and then found out. But
it's my favorite podcast.
Yeah, no, yeah. You are handsome. You're good looking. Your wife is beautiful. Your kids are beautiful. That's all factual. But
my wife is beautiful. My kids are beautiful.
Your wife is gorgeous. I want to start here because this is a pivotal moment in your life. That's a pivotal moment in history that everyone can probably place where they were at this on this day. And it's September 11th, 2011. It was a turning point in your life, in your career, because you were in New York. You were inside the Twin Towers just hours before they fell. And then you began search and rescue. Can you take us back to that day, that time, and what that meant to you and how it was a turning point in your life?
Sure. Yeah, I'll share the part of it that's really relevant to the work that I'm doing here today, which is I was a full-fledged member of Hollywood with all of the materialistic goals that you generate when you are a product of Hollywood. And I directed my first film in the maybe 99 by the time it was done, something like that. And we had won some festivals, did really well. And I was in New York to meet with a person who he brokers distribution deals for independent films.
Yeah.
And he's kind of known as having the Midas touch. And he had seen my first film at a film festival and loved it. And it didn't get the release that he thought it should get. So a couple of years after the film, a year after the film was released, he reached out and said, "What the heck is going on with your film? I need to get behind this thing." So one of the bit players in my film had passed away. We went to New York for the funeral. At the same time, we went and met with this gentleman and did a handshake deal. And he said, I'm going to take this under my wing, which was huge at the time. I haven't heard much from this guy in the last 20 years of what he does, if he does that at all anymore. But he was really known for having an incredible success record for a lot of the micro budget independent films that broke through and went mainstream, the ones that people still talk about today. And so he was determined to do that with my first film, and it was really wonderful, great news. And I was sleeping on the couch of the person who produced Howard Stern's E! Entertainment program. And he was also the manager of this actor who had passed away. So I was sleeping on his couch. We went to the funeral on 9/8. And then we went out to dinner on 9/9. And during the dinner, his name is Doug. He's still a good friend of mine today. And he had found out that I had never been in the World Trade Center. And it was very interesting because he became obsessed, like unusual to his character. He became really obsessed with making sure that I would go the next day to the World Trade Center. Now, this is on 9/9/2001. Okay. And so much so that the conversation would shift and we'd go back to enjoying ourselves having dinner, and he'd just be looking at me across the table. And I go, "What's up?" And he goes, "You better not be effing with me. You're going to go, right? You're going to go tomorrow to the World Trade Center." Yeah. Yeah. And he wrote it on a napkin and he said, "Go here and take this and do all of this." Okay. He was obsessed. And finally I laughed. I go, "Doug, why do you care that I go to the World Trade Center?" And he thought about it for a second. He goes, "You know why? Go to the top, look at the view. Of course, it's spectacular. But I want you to actually stand at the base of those two towers. And I want you to look up at those monolithic structures of man. And I want you to consider what a joke it was that they tried to blow him up a couple of years ago." And I looked at him and I just laughed and I said, "Whatever, man. Okay, cool. I'll go." So I went in, did the whole thing as a tourist, and then I took a picture of me standing in front of the tower so I could prove to him that I was there.
Yeah.
It was so weird. And then that was on 9/10 that I was in the building. And then on 9/11, I'm sleeping on his sofa. I'm a rather tall person. My foot is sticking out of the covers, and he slaps my bare foot and startles me awake. And I look at him, and he just looks panicked. And he's pointing at the TV, and he's going, "They bombed us! They bombed us!" And I said, "What? What? Who bombed what?" And I look, and I see two towers and smoke coming out of one on the television set. And I was like, "What? What do you mean they bombed us?" He said, "They just bombed the World Trade Center." And so first, I had to kind of wake up for a second, and then he goes in and he's doing a live phone-in with Howard Stern. He's on the air, and I get up, I walk around the corner, I look into his bedroom. He's on the phone, and part of me went, "Wait a minute here, wait." My movie was actually about a prank, and Howard Stern's a rascal, and this character was one of Howard Stern's regulars on his show, the one who died that we were there for. Are they pulling a prank on me? Is this why Doug was so obsessed?
So obsessive that you went there,
World Trade Center, they're pulling something on me. So I go, "Hey, Doug, let's go to the roof and check this out," because we weren't too far from it. And he goes, "I was just thinking that." And I thought, what is going on here? So we got in the elevator, and we ride up the elevator. And as soon as the doors open, the whole rooftop is just filled with all the neighbors up there. And that's when I realized, oh, shit, it's real. What's happening here? Yeah. Long story short, he had media badges, New York media badges. And so we put those on, and we jumped on bicycles and went down to the scene, and people were still coming out. We had badges on, and the police that had barricades and all that, they would look at the badge, and we would just point to them, and they'd say, "Okay, come on in." And so we ended up getting in when they were pushing all the citizens out. And then I stayed there for 3 days. And the relevant part of this is something happened to me 50 some hours into the experience where we were ordered to go take a nap. For all the first responders, the people who got there first, go take a nap, because you'll be dangerous to all of us if you've not had a little bit of sleep. And so I went to an abandoned lobby of an apartment building, and I dusted off the couch because the windows had been blown out, and I laid down with my face pressed against the sofa at the back of the couch, and I dozed off immediately because I was exhausted. And I had a lucid dream, and it was the first victim that we had found, which was this very small man in a full business suit, and he was had been crushed. He had hid under a fire truck, and the fire truck was crushed on top of him. Oh, wow. And I woke up, and I pictured him kneeling behind me, and I could feel his hot breath on the back of my neck. And I don't have to describe what he looked like. He was smashed. And so it was this horrible, gruesome image of this person. And I could feel and hear him breathing on the back of my neck. And I knew that I was going to turn around and face him. And I was just, my heart sunk, and I was just terrified. And finally I summoned up the courage to spin around. And of course, no one was there. And I sat up on the couch. And I probably only got 5 minutes of sleep at that point. And I thought, there's no way I'm going back to sleep. I don't want that to continue. And I sat there, I rubbed my eyes for a minute, and then this voice that I'm not afraid to call it God. I didn't know what it was at the time, because I didn't have that connection in my life that I have now. And I said, the voice said, "This could be your Vietnam, or." And I just went, "What? Or what? What?" Well, that was so clear, but you stopped. Hello? Test, checking, hello? And nothing. "This could be your Vietnam, or." And so I went, what does that mean? And so I got screwed. So I put, all the gear back on, and I go out, it's nighttime, and I round the corner from where I was trying to sleep. And in the time that I had been trying to sleep, they had erected these giant football stadium lights that they didn't have before. And so I'm a cinematographer, and I love light. I love, I'm the geek will stop and look at patches of light come through the tree on the ground and the rays of light. And I just love lighting. And so I round the corner, and I saw everything was lit up and oddly sparkling. And my first impulse was, wow, so beautiful. And then I just was hit with, like, what did I just say? I can't call this beautiful. Like, how careless of me to call such a horrific incident where there's women going around with flyers with pictures of their husband. "Have you seen my husband? I know he's alive. Tell me if you've seen him." And I'm calling this beautiful. I stood there, and then I asked myself, is there beauty here? And suddenly my perception shifted in such a way that I started to see the situation from being a victim of the situation and how horrific it was. I saw 2,000 men and women, chain gangs, all the way up the rubble, down in the elevator shafts, pulling out, they're in body bags by that time, but pulling out bodies out of the elevator shafts. And the report had already gone around that the air was incredibly toxic, and everyone there was at risking their lives. Matter of fact, my friend Doug, 22 years later, he's now having major issues, and so I'm helping him with his case because he's trying to get it taken care of now. And I thank God I've been fortunate, but it's just started to affect him in a bad way. He's got respiratory issues now. And so anyway, I saw this happen, and I stood there, and suddenly I could see what I couldn't see before, and that was the beauty. Like, men and women are here. Everyone was told how dangerous the air is. No one left. We know now that the chances of finding a survivor is very slim. Yeah. At the very slight chance that they could save one human life, these 2,000 men and women are risking their own life. And I said to myself, it just kind of came out. I don't even think I said it, but my mouth said it. I said out loud, this is who we are. This is who we are. And I just started to cry in that moment. Just had my first real, like let that out of everything we've experienced here. Because what it meant to me, Hal, was that all I had experienced up until that point was people being people trying to survive in this material world and get what they want, right? I met a lot of great people, but I'd never experienced a situation that was so much bigger than the accumulation of all the egos and personas that were present there, that they put all that behind them. It didn't matter what ranking they had. Some of them were fire chiefs, some of them were civilians. And they were all there in the name of trying to save a human life. And to witness how important that was. And then a moment that happened earlier that day where we actually saved a rescue dog that was going into cardiac arrest. And to see the look on the faces when people had the experience of saving a life and realizing that there's this intrinsic need within us to protect each other, to save each other, to be with each other and breathe with each other. That when I witnessed that and I said, this is who we are, I remembered, I said, all this other performance that we put on, that we don't care or that we don't need each other, it's just BS. Like this is who we are. Like we will risk our lives at the slight chance of saving another human life. This is the core of humanity. Like there is something good in the heart of everyone. If we can just get past all the addictions and material fetishes that steer us away from that memory. And so that was the awakening that happened to me in that moment that I'll never forget, that when I really realized that people are really extraordinary. And I went back and packed up everything I had, put it in storage, left Hollywood, and never returned.
Wow. Because at that time you were in the midst of this ego-driven, materialistic Hollywood society. And then that pulled you out of it. And then you shifted your work, right? And then you began making films to how would you describe the types of films that you make?
Yeah, it really did shift my work, because suddenly it was a roller coaster ride for me, because now I went to Hollywood at 19 years old. I did the whole, me in a rental car and a small U-Haul truck, and moved everything I had and had $1,100 to my name and did the whole thing. And then that machinery kind of changes you. So I didn't even realize that I had changed. I
like
wasn't
a boiling frog analogy, right?
Exactly. I wasn't my mother's son anymore. Suddenly things that really should matter didn't matter as much, and the things that shouldn't matter were my top goal. And it just kind of happens to you there, because you're in this environment where, You're competing. You mentioned in the intro that model. I did that for like 1 year, and I only did it to see other parts of the world because I was raised with not a lot of money, and so no one in my family ever had the ability to travel,
Mm.
and so I really took it on so I could get out of the United States for the first time, and tolerated it for a year. Really didn't enjoy it at all,
Mm.
but I really enjoyed the creative side, the being behind the camera. But that I believe that all artists uh, are usually activated by a primal desire to do something meaningful.
Mm.
And then you get stuck into the machinery of the consumerist, the maze that uses you and your talent to sell things, even if it's just an ideology. But
Right.
mostly it's products, mostly it's things. It's uh, and I had been stuck in that. I was directing music videos, had a great career. I was a still photographer for years, shooting major billboards and magazine covers and all of that. And I started to ask myself after that experience, though, and this really shook me up. I said, what have I produced that when I have children, I have two amazing boys now, but at that time I had no children. What have I produced that I would be proud to show my children?
Mm.
And I couldn't think of one thing, Hal. There's things that would be appropriate that I could show them for sure. I didn't do softcore porn or anything like
Sure,
that.
sure, sure.
But there's nothing that I'd really like. Would I show them this is a cool music video? But it's like, girls in thongs on a yacht dancing? Like, what is this? What am I? I'm
Yeah.
selling someone's album. And also, is that the most respect I could show for women to objectify them? That I suddenly just snapped a grid. I could see everything that I'd done and thought, I'm just being used here for my talent. It's like, this is what they do. And so I couldn't think of one thing that I'd be like, this is what I made, son. Check this out.
Yeah.
And that really bothered me because I thought, then why am I doing it? Because even though I was making great money, oddly, I don't remember ever keeping enough money. Like, it was always gone.
Sure.
Easy come, easy go. And I
Yeah.
was, sometimes I made $10,000 a day for an album cover.
Yeah.
But I don't ever remember. I didn't invest it. I didn't buy a home. I didn't do any of this stuff. It was just gone.
Yeah.
And so I thought, what do I have to show for all this hard work? And what has happened? What has happened to me? And so I had to go, and it took like a year and a half off.
Mm.
Lived in a friend's vineyard. I was offered to write and direct the sequel to Easy Rider, of all things.
Oh, wow.
I wrote it. The script got rave reviews, and then before it went into production, I realized that this was the carrot trying to lead me back into the maze, and I let it go. $400,000 paycheck,
Oh, wow.
and the bonus was a new Harley. And I said I'll take my Harley, please.
Oh,
And
oh,
I passed up the $400,000 instead for a $30,000 Harley, and just said, I don't want to be part of this anymore. But then I was scared because I didn't know what to do with myself. I had been in entertainment the whole time, and I
sure.
just knew I couldn't do that. But I wanted to pursue my craft, but I didn't know where to do it, and if they were even interested, is in having a guy like me that wasn't interested in playing their game. It
Mm.
was their game, is their rule, their league, and I was a player that, as I said to a friend, I said, I feel like I signed up for the NFL and I don't want to get tackled anymore,
Hmm.
but I love football and I don't know what to do because that's part of the game, and but I'm too tired of getting tackled. And then so part of that metaphor led me to realizing, you know what, there are ways to play the same game without certain elements, and that's why they have different baseball leagues and different football leagues. And why don't we create our own league? And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, and bring them together. And so, long story short, I created something called the Elevate Film Festival. I met the love of my life, Nadia, and we
Wow.
created that together. And it was a real call out to filmmakers around the world to start creating works that mattered, that actually lifted the world up instead of dividing us.
Hmm. I want to comment on what you just said, lifting the world up instead of dividing us. And I want to go back to the World Trade Center. And you mentioned that your one of your epiphanies was to see like this is who we are. Human beings will risk their lives for each other. And what it brings up for me is something that I've been saying for the last 3 years, as we as a people, as a society, have been divided maybe more than I've ever seen before, because those in power have vehicles now to divide us with social media and so on and so forth. We've been really divided, and the what comes up for me is that our humanity trumps ideology. Humanity trumps ideology. These ideologies, this groupthink that divides people, to me, are differences, which are differences of opinion or belief, are relatively superficial compared to our shared humanity. And that to me is what you touched on, is like, we're all human beings. We're part of the human family. We all want the same things. We just want to be healthy and happy and safe and loved and have fun. That's what we want. It's not red versus blue. It's not, it's not left versus right. It's, hey, we're all on the same team. And if you had lived another person's life and been exposed to the ideologies they had and the ideas and the environment and the perspectives of the people, you'd probably think exactly like they do, right? It's simply, we are a product of our environment. And so I feel like you really remind me that we've got to get back in touch with our humanity and really love each other and show up for each other and see each other as our fellow human family, not different, not, you're stupid because you think this way and believe this way. But hey, I love you exactly the way that you are. And yeah, so anyway.
Well, you're touching on a subject that is probably the most interesting to me right now in this phase of my life, and it's why I chose for the Great Awakening to end with a message that we have the choice right now between dehumanization and rehumanization. And the message in the film is dehumanization. We need to do nothing except for to allow that process to continue, because that is an agenda that is there to have us all demoralized and dehumanized, so that just think about all the narratives and all the movies that have come out in the last 20, 30, 40 years. A lot of the iconic, really wonderful movies also have at the core of them, particularly the sci-fi movies, the idea that humanity is a failed experiment, that we are a cancer, a plague, a parasite. And that dehumanization that's by design, because when you can have us begin to question our own divinity, our own worth, that's where all trouble starts. When we start to feel worthless, like we actually missed the mark and there's something not right about us. The moment we feel incomplete and even, toxic to a degree, these narratives, particularly laid on men in the past few years of everything we do that used to once be
revered,
acknowledged and revered is now toxic. And all of that is by design, so that we start to really question our humanity. And for me, it's the answer to rehumanization is, as I say in the movie, all it requires is one action, and that's for us to remember. We have been led away from remembering who and what we are. And that's, again, by design, because then it leaves us kind of like this open, empty canvas for somebody else to paint their portrait of us. And it may not resemble us or who we know we are at all, but then we start to believe that we are this other caricature. And that caricature can be led away from their own morals, their own principles, their own intuition, to follow other people. And that's ultimately what these people that we've all just been exposed to over the past 3 years, that's what they want. They want to be in charge. They want to lead. They want us to be so desperate and dependent that we have no choice but to look to them as the savior, and to rule out higher power. That's why there's so much war against this thing we call God, because I see it every day in my work. The two people that I will say are the most impressive when it comes to real, true power, unstoppable, fearless people, are parents of children who have been injured, and by people that have a foundation of faith. they are the ones who don't think about losing their house and their home or their job or their status or whatever. And they just say, look, I'm in service to God, and let all that stuff go. That's not what matters. They have their morals in a line. And that's inspired me to go deeper into that myself, to instill that into my children as a father, to have them understand that everything they watch, everything that they see on YouTube and everything is designed to capture their attention. And Hal, I've learned that our attention is like the rudder of our ship. And if anyone listening to this has ever been on a cruise, if the rudder of that ship was off by a human hair, that ship would go to a different continent than it was directed to go into. That one little fin of a rudder steers that giant ship. And so we have this thing called our attention. And I know, as somebody who's sat in boardrooms with high-level ad executives for years, as we're trying to work out campaigns for products and whatever it might be, their objective is to capture your attention.
Sure.
That's why you see so many commercials that have nothing to do with the product, but it's a girl in a bikini, and she just happens to be eating a juicy burger that drips down her chest, right? And so it gets your attention. And it just happens to be a Burger King commercial,
Sure.
Honda commercial, whatever it is. Doesn't matter, because it's just get your attention. And women pay attention to girls in bikinis, and men pay attention to girls in bikinis. So it's like, we just want your attention. But it's what they do with your attention once they've captured it. It's a hijacking. They literally steer it where they want it to go. And they have to be consistent with this and persistent with this to constantly keep the wheel of your attention in their hands, so they can then steer you to believing that you're incomplete. And if you buy their product, you'll be that much closer to being complete. That, this is what you should look like, and men should do this and women should do that. And they put us into these categories and then create products that are posed as solutions, and convince us that we need those products. And that's why they even call us consumers. They literally refer to us as consumers, not the people, not the public, but consumers. And I think there's a major shift that must take place in the vein of what you said about returning to our humanity. Absolutely, 100%, you nailed it. Yeah. It's also shifting from consumer to creator. And it's two different actions that happen. Consumption takes, creators give. And so we need to come back into recognizing that we are creators. We create children, we create other humans, we create art, we create food, we create lives, we create language, we innovate. And it doesn't matter how much money you have, what degree of education you have. There's a genius within everyone that is here to create. And it's when we stop creating that life becomes old and boring, because we're no longer creating. We're now just consuming other people's creations. And so this is a call to all people of all ages to reactivate the creator within you.
Yeah. Amen. No, it's true. And if you look, our society is, we consume media. I mean, when I'm at the airport, we just went to Colorado with my family and wife and kids, and we're in the airport, and I said, Sophia, my daughter, I said, look at everybody on their phones, and I said, I want you to imagine, before phones existed, what would those people be doing? They'd probably be talking to each other, maybe reading a book or a magazine. But instead they're just mindlessly consuming content, scrolling. It really is like a dystopian sci-fi movie back in the day, where you would have seen like an entire population just glued to some device where they're being programmed, if you will. This is a great opportunity. I want to pivot into parenting. And this is where you really shine. I mean, your work is phenomenal, but when the last conversation that we had, when we got into parenting, I was like, oh, my mind is blown. I can't believe I waited this long to get into parenting. And I want to start by saying this. I heard about you from two of my friends, and this was before we met. And it was Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter. She called me because she was thinking of moving to Austin. She ended up moving to Atlanta. And but she called me and said, hey, just wanting, we're going to come visit Austin. I wanted to come see you, and wanted to see if you knew any areas that you recommend that we look for houses. And then she said, hey, do you know Mikki Willis? I said, no, I've heard of him. My friend sent me one of his films recently, and I'm like blown away by it. And it was Plandemic 1, and actually, and 2, I think at that time. And I said, she said, and I'm just paraphrasing, but she basically said he's one of the greatest human beings on the planet. And you photographed her for a number of years, correct?
Correct.
How many years, by the way?
Oh, geez, I don't know, but off and on for probably 4 to 6 years, something like that.
And so she said, you're one of the greatest human beings on the planet. And she spoke so highly of you and said, you have to meet Mikki. I think she might have connected us. And then another friend of mine, Preston Smiles, who I've had on the podcast, Preston said, do you know Mikki Willis? And he just raved about what a phenomenal guy you are. And the way people describe you, and now I describe you this way, is, I use words like integrity. I feel like you have impeccable integrity, and I think that was shown a bit today in terms of how you transitioned out of Hollywood. Like your integrity started to emerge. And you're like, I can't live out of alignment with my values. I can't make films or do work that my kids aren't going to one day be proud of. So integrity is a word that often I think is used to describe you. Love is another word. I feel like you embody love, you exude love. And you have 2 boys, Zuri and Azai. What ages are they now?
9 and 11.
So you waited to have kids relatively, so you were in your 35-ish, 37 before you had kids, right?
Is that
Did I
right?
do the math right? No, older, 40.
40.
40, yeah, 40. So, so you had more wisdom. So that's a benefit that you have over some of the dads, right? Is that you had a lot of wisdom.
Glad I waited.
But no. So let's talk about that. And there's some stories you shared with me last time that I would love for you to share again. And just start where you want in terms of what your philosophy is on parenting. And I want to mention one thing that came up for me as you were talking. You're talking about the world that we live in and the way, YouTube and social media is programming adults and even worse, programming kids because they're so much more susceptible to that programming. So I do want to make sure that we touch on at some point, just mentioning this before I forget, how do we protect our kids, or how do we navigate, or how do we set them up for success in this digital world?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I want to say thank you for those kind words. Really, thank you for those kind words. I do my best to be in integrity, and still a work in progress, and I'm always having to tune up and recognize my old and bad habits that still creep in all the time.
Sure.
But having 2 young boys really holds me to account, because I realize, man, do they watch everything I do, and my bad habits become their bad habits, and I would love to not pass those on to them.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the beauty of having children, is they really become, as I had a friend say, no mirror is clearer than your children. And so one of the things that I'd love to talk about is what I've learned as I taught for a number of years. I taught performing arts, and it was really a class of, my background is really in ontological research. I've been very intrigued since I was a child of what makes humans tick. Like what is this thing called human being? And so I just became, as I've told you before, I was the kid that my mom would drop us off at the mall to go to the arcade, and I'd play a few games and then meet an old man and sit by the fountain and listen to World War II stories. Just because I was very intrigued by stories and by people. And now I understand that was all me working towards what I'm doing now, to be a storyteller. But as a teacher, I was working on a lot of new styles of teaching, and I some of those I now apply to parenting. And that is, first and foremost, I've learned to teach my kids through what they want, not through what I want. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. A lot of times we just go, do this because that's what I'd prefer you to do. And that's polite. That's the polite or the right thing to do, or that makes my life easier. So it's what I want. Please perform and satisfy me. And I think there's a real problem with that, the direction of that teaching. And so what I try to do most times with my kids is I find what is their highest value? What do they love the most? And I try to find a lesson that connects to them so they can understand that their behavior might be counterproductive to what they want most. And so for instance, if we talk about, it's just boys are just getting, my little one follows whatever Big Brother does. Big Brother's almost 12 years old. And so Big Brother's starting to have that interest in pretty girls. Mm. And so this is just a metaphor example of what I mean by teaching them through what they want. I'll say, good breath and clean teeth are really important to girls. You know that, right?
Yeah, nice.
Suddenly it's like, I got to go brush my teeth, right?
That's great.
That's what I mean by teaching them through what they want, because now if they realize there's a personal benefit that moves them closer to the things that are important to them instead of just having an authority. That's the other part of it too. We also don't want to teach our kids just listen. I mean, how many for years, what was it? Just do it because I said do it.
Totally.
Now, there have been a few times I've said that, but it's only because I'm limited in my time. I'm on a call or something's happening and I'll say, do this. I'll say, why? I say, because I asked you to do it. I'll explain it later. Mm-hmm. And then later it's like, okay, come on, we have time now. Here's what was going on. And here's why I requested that of you. Mm-hmm. Let's explain it. I explain everything to my boys. And some parents will say, I just don't have time to do that. And it's like, you don't realize how much time it takes to repeat yourself over and over and over, to do these daily things that all parents complain about. And if you take the time to explain each thing, and here's one example. So we started letting the boys a couple of years ago have a little bit of screen time for video games. And we first allotted them too much time. We didn't know that at the time, but then we noticed we'd be at a water park and Azai would be, 10 years old, and he'd say, how much longer are we going to stay here? I'd say, what? You want to leave? We've been here 2 hours. We're going to be here like 5 hours. It's what do you? And then my boys are really honest with me. So I say, what is it? Are you not having fun here? No, it's great, Dad. But what's going on? Well, this is the weekend and this is when I have my 2 hours time and I want to get home and play Minecraft.
Yeah.
Wow. So the real world is can't compete with that 3D graphics and all that stuff. So instead of just saying, no, you can't, we sat down. The first thing we did is we watched some movies about video game addiction. And it's amazing at what my little one, who's now 9, was 7 at the time. It's amazing what he was able to understand. And we paused it a lot because I'd say, okay, you probably don't understand what cognitive means, right? So cognitive is of the mind and I explain it to him, right? Yeah. So it's okay, moving on. And then we'd have a review afterwards. So what did you guys get from this? And it was amazing that my little guy at 7 years old would be like, well, there's something that happens to you and it's like, yeah, that's exactly it. Good job. Yeah. And then we took a little further one day because we noticed that it was becoming this thing between us and them where mom and dad were the ones shutting down the thing they love the most, which is video game time.
Sure.
And so one day I just was like, okay, I have to find a new way instead of just shaming them and repeating myself over and over, because there's a big danger when you repeat yourself or you think, let me just get louder, because then your voice just becomes white noise and they don't listen anymore. And so one day I was put into the bed and I said, I want to tell you guys, I want to ask you a question. I want you to envision a virgin wheat field. And my little guy goes, what's virgin mean? I said, it means untouched. Like no one has ever plowed it. It's just beautiful golden wheat. Picture that. And they close their eyes. It's a picture like sun going down. It's just, okay, now what would happen if you walked across that wheat field? And they're always like, me first. I'm like, okay, go ahead. It's like, it would get trampled. The wheat would get trampled. Yeah, it would. And what would happen, the next day, would that wheat still be trampled? They'd say, no, it'd probably come back up. Yeah, it would. But what happened if you crossed that every single day for the next year? And then all the animals follow your path and they start crossing it. And they said it would make probably like a dirt path. And I said, yeah, kind of like the hiking trail we go on. I said, are you guys aware? I've never even shared this with you, but those hiking trails, those are natural. Like there's no lawn people that come in and trim them. Like that's those dirt path is permanent because the grass finally said, too much traffic, we give up and we'll never come back again.
Yeah.
This is for, we've given way to the feet. And I said, so it becomes a permanent pathway because of the repetitive nature of how many people walk that path. Everything that you guys do on a repetitive basis creates neural pathways in your mind. And that your mind develops, so your synapse fire, all these things happen, but it creates a neural pathway. And the more you do that on a repetitive basis, the more it becomes like the hiking trail, like a permanent path. And the more you do it, it becomes even a rut, like a deep rut. And that, if you've ever seen water go down a hill, it will find the little cracks and crevices to join together and use that rut to expedite the process of running downhill. When you guys carve, it's such a deep rut from playing your video games too much. It becomes a channel of information that will have you lose dominion, power over your choices. And these people that design these games and all these things to steal your attention will know how to funnel their ideologies and information into that channel, because it'll be dressed up to kind of a music video game look and sound and everything. So it'll catch your attention and they'll channel other information into that rut. And you won't even have dominion over your choices. Next thing you know, you'll just believe whatever they're telling you. And that's why we have so many people out in the world that believe things that they don't even understand why they believe it.
Yeah.
And they'll die for it, but they don't even know why. And it doesn't even make logical sense because they've carved these neural pathways in their mind. And so that's what I'm protecting you from. And that changed things for my kids to where now they'll actually, they'll be concerned because they'll say, you know, I was over so-and-so's house and I'm really concerned about him because Daddy played for 6 hours straight.
Yeah.
And he's like, can you have that talk with him? I'm like, no, you go have the talk with him.
Yeah.
Tell him what's up. It's
Can you tell
probably
about the
me
wheat field,
tomorrow.
Dad?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so those, the point to this is our mind, they're developed to learn through symbology, through metaphor and symbology. And that's one of the reasons that we have certain cultures like China and people that their language is in characters. And it's one of the reasons that they do so well when they come here and they excel, and why they even had affirmative action had to work against them, because they were just excelling and our colleges were being filled with Asian people, because part of it is because number one, they're disciplined, but they also, a lot of them learn through symbology. And we've developed this rote learning of typed out letters and words, and it's more difficult for the mind to retain what we're reading and seeing and what we're learning from others. And so if we give our kids metaphors and symbols to recognize, so the wheat field becomes something that all they have to do in that moment is not to remember what Dad said, but they just remember wheat field. Oh, boom, boom, I better take a break. I better take a break.
Visual.
And it's a really great teaching tool I've found for young kids to always give them a metaphor. And so I teach my kids through metaphor, and it's been very, very effective.
So since I first heard that story from you, by the way, I did go talk to my son. I had the wheat field conversation, and then I did bring it up to him again when he wanted to play video games. I go, remember the wheat field? He goes, yeah, you're right. I want you to tell the other part of that story that you shared with me before, which is about your son self-regulating after you had that conversation with the iPad.
So remind me again. There's a couple of self-regulating.
Yeah.
Which
so
one was
it was I don't remember if it was Azai or Zuri, but they came to you and said, Dad, I need to talk to you.
Oh yeah,
And they
yeah.
pulled you aside.
They gave me their iPad actually and said, hold on to this. That happened again today too with Zuri. Came in to let me know that that he finds himself. He's 9 years old and he wants to be a chef, and it's been amazing because he's actually making bread, and
oh wow,
and he just got a new oven last night, and he made churros this morning. He's really into it. But he admitted to me, he said, we've allowed him to go on YouTube to watch cooking channels and stuff. But he said, Dad, I want to let you know that a lot when I'm on there looking at cooking channels, I see other things pop up and I end up just losing control and going down a rabbit hole of things that were outside of our agreement of what I should be watching. So he came to me to let me know that he's witnessing that's happening, and he wanted my help and creating something that wouldn't leave him so vulnerable to that temptation. And I was like, this is amazing, really amazing that you're coming to me. He came, I was editing. He said, can we talk? And so we go to the next room and he said, privately. I said, okay. And this is what it was about. He's like, I've noticed that it's really hard for me not to just, and I get stuck. Next thing I know, an hour has gone by and I'm looking at stuff that you didn't tell me I could look at. And he goes, I really understand. Like it's almost like an addiction. Like we talk about self-control, right? So that's kind of the stage we're in right now, is the importance of self-control. Yeah. And the way that this world is set up to create addiction and to leverage addiction, and how so we point it out all the time. Like, check this out. Like, this is all to get you to be attracted to this so that you will bypass whatever's good for you. So just this morning we had the talk about, we actually used the analogy of really, really obese people. And I said, some of them have a condition. We have to be very compassionate for that.
Sure.
And some of them have really bad habits. I said, imagine having no self-control such that you would rather eat McDonald's and all this bad food and carry an additional 150 pounds around, 200 pounds. I go, imagine carrying me around. I'm a little over 200 pounds. Imagine carrying me around all day, trying to enjoy yourself at a theme park or whatever it might be, or just trying to sit on an airplane and being crammed in that little seat with people around you. It becomes really tough. But if you really recognize what a draw that is, that some of these people still continue to consume what they know creates that situation, like it has power over them. Yeah. And I said, so it's like a muscle. You have to realize that every time you show discipline, because God gives you free will. And so it's like donuts or salad, you choose. And a little bit of that's okay. A little bit in moderation is cool. But if you choose all donuts, the result is going to be this. And so it's really about having the ability to have the choice. But every time you exercise and you choose the highest choice, because your life is determined by the choices that you make. And so if you can each time go, I'm craving this sugar, I really want this, but I'm going to say no. I said, every time you do that, it's like building a muscle. You develop strength, self-control, and that will come in so handy later in this world, especially when addiction is skyrocketing and dependency. And the bad forces of this world, the big pharmas of this world, they want you to have that, to be fragile and weak such that you can be easily addicted.
Yeah, they want you to be a consumer.
They want you to be a lifelong customer of their products. Yeah. And once you start, it's really difficult to get off of that. So, that was this morning of just really having this conversation just around self-control. And like, can you, in those moments when you're flipping through looking at a cooking channel and then you see something really cool, can you say, I'm sure it's cool, I'm sure it's interesting, and no? Yeah. Because every time you do, you get stronger. And that will pay off when you get older, especially when alcohol and all these other things come your way. You'll be able to choose the stuff that will actually sustain a healthy life for you. And that's what I want for you above everything.
And what I love about your approach is just the thoughtful, respectful dialogue with your kids, right? And I try to model that with my kids too, just talking to them about like explaining the why. And I think that's an important piece too, is that the whole because I said so is possibly the worst parenting. And like you said, in the moment, you got to do it sometimes, but I'll explain it later, right? And it's like anything. Simon Sinek became famous by helping us understand how important having a compelling why is. I think that applies to parenting as well. If your kids don't have a compelling why and they only did it because dad said I had to do it, then when dad's not there saying you have to do it, they're going to make different decisions. And you're not empowering them with critical thinking, which, I mean, we could spend an hour on how the group think that our society has become addicted to. So much easier just, I'm part of that group. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. I do whatever they think, whatever they say, right? And so this critical thinking piece, by having these conversations, by default, you are empowering your kids with critical thinking to understand why you're making the recommendations or the guidelines that you are, and why they would want to self-regulate themselves into their, into their future as they grow up.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that is, we sustain that by having a lot of intimate conversations, and keeping the conversations also exciting, so that the kids don't see dad as boring. Like, oh,
Yeah.
here comes another lecture. It's
Here
not.
comes
It's not,
another
it's never a
lecture.
lecture. It's
Yeah.
framed as, we all have the ability to be storytellers, and
Yeah.
and because that's my job, my kids relate to me as a storyteller. So I'll say, "You guys want to hear a story?" Yes, they're always very excited to hear one of Daddy's stories, and my stories will always have a meaning that is valuable for their life. And I'll tell them something. I told them one day. I told them the story. I said, there were only a couple of black kids in my high school that I went to, and because I was raised by a mom that really was very insistent on loving all people, I really wanted to get to know, and because I was that kid that loved to hear and talk to different people, I really wanted to become friends with the two black kids in school. It
Sure.
was just so unique and different to me.
Yeah.
And so one day I brought one of them home, and now I had the perception that, because of whatever propaganda is out there, and as a young man, I was probably 14 years old, something like that.
Mm.
I had the perception that black people were wild and radical.
Mm. Mm.
And so I wanted to show off for my friend. And my mom was, "Hey, good to meet you." I don't remember what the kid's name is. "Good to meet you." And I said something sarcastic to my mom, and just trying to show off for my friend.
Yeah.
And we went into the bedroom, and he goes, "Dude, I can't believe you talk to your mom like that. My mom would backhand me, man. You
Mm.
need to show respect to your mom."
Mm.
And I remember Hal being like, I just wanted to crawl under a rock in that moment,
Yeah.
because I was
Just
trying so
humiliated.
hard to press this kid. It was like I wanted to be his friend so bad.
Yeah.
And here I am, like, he's shaming me. And he
Mm.
he was right. And I
Mm.
thought, oh wow, like I did the opposite of impressing him. He was like, and honestly, he never came over again. He
Mm.
was so turned off by I don't even remember what I said to my mom, but something trying to be funny. And
Yeah.
he set me straight. So my kids remember that story, and I would tell them that. They'll come home and they'll be like, "You know what happened, Dad? Well, we were at the trampoline park. This kid was being real rude with his mom." And I told him, I said, "Hey, that's your mom. She gave you
Mm.
life. You need to,
Nice.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "I remember that what happened to you with the kid at school." And I was like,
Yeah.
awesome.
It's
So I
amazing. I
tell
mean,
him,
storytelling is the way that we learn, more effective than anything.
yeah. And I said, if an adult would have told me that, it wouldn't have landed for me. But the fact that one of my peers and somebody that I wanted to be connected with put me in my place and had the courage to tell me, didn't just do what a lot of friends do, which is just, let's laugh and pretend like it's funny. No, he
Yeah.
said, not cool.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
lost that friend.
Yeah.
And I
It
said,
was
I'm never
a good friend. It could have been a good friend. Yeah.
really, really good friend. And I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
that's a friend you need to be for your friends. Like when they come out and they're like, "Hey, let's go egg this house. Hey, all
Yeah.
this stuff's going to come up. You can go along with that if you want to, or you can be the one to say, why would we vandalize some stranger's property? Like that
Yeah.
is really like, is that, you think you're going to impress me, or that's something you need to do in your life?"
Yeah.
I said, I did those things as a kid because I didn't have a dad,
Sure.
so I went off and I was a follower for a long time and just went with whatever the group did. Don't be that kid. Don't follow trends. Set them.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the greatest parenting lessons I have ever learned was from Joe Rogan. And I was watching Joe's show. This was probably a couple of years ago. And he said that most parents, they tell their kid, if their kid does something wrong, they violate family value, or they get in trouble, or they steal something, or whatever, the parents take this moral high ground and authority, and it's like, you shouldn't do that, you're not supposed to do that, you're bad, right? Some form of shaming the kid or making them feel bad. And Joe said that whenever my kid screws up, does something quote unquote bad, he said, I immediately search my memory banks for when I did that exact thing or something very
Yeah.
similar. And instead of saying, you shouldn't do that, right? I'm right, you're wrong, I'm the moral authority. He says, hey, you know what, buddy? Right? Getting down onto their level. When I was your age, I did something really similar. and he tells a story from his own life. And the kid is now, instead of, right, if you're yelling at your kid or saying you shouldn't, right, they don't feel connected to you, right? They feel afraid of you. And he says, hey, come here, come here. Let me tell you, when I was your age, I did the same thing. I stole something. And then here's the consequence. Here's what happened. And man, I wish I would have known better, but now you can know better, right? So I just thought it was the most brilliant, simple way of parenting, which is like, I've been there. I messed up too. Now we feel connected. Whoa, Dad, you did that too? You messed up too? Okay, so I'm not a total screw up. Well, what happened? How did it? Oh, wow. And now you can teach them. And so I think that, to your point of analogies, you have a gift. You're a filmmaker, right? You have an unfair advantage over most parents, right? That you are a storyteller at the highest level. And I think, though, for any of us parents, that maybe that the wheat field analogy might not pop into our head. It's what story from your own life can you draw on to share with your child about how you made mistakes as well, and you learn from them. And, thankfully, most of us, I know me, I've got, drug use, wrecking cars, stealing. You pick any screw up, I've got a story from my child about how drinking underage, you name it, right? I think I've got a story I can pull out of my pocket to help.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That is, you're so spot on. And I never heard Joe say that. I love that he parents that way, because I have, a couple of times I've had my boys really, they're working on being the best little men they can be. And so my little guy, he tries to keep up with big brother. And so it gets sometimes challenging for him. And Zuri will come to me, and he'll admit to me that he made a bad choice. And our deal is I say, I appreciate, sometimes he'll cry, and I'll say, I appreciate that it matters to you enough that you're crying right now. But if those are tears of shame, let's rethink this situation, because shame will actually lead you right back into that same trouble again. It's counterproductive. And when you shame yourself for making a mistake, you will create a lower esteem about yourself, and that's where the bad choices come from. If you have really high esteem and hold yourself in high regard, you make less choices, because you respect yourself. And if you respect yourself, you respect your word, you respect your choices, and you respect others. And so let's just work on that shame part of it. Like, let's celebrate the fact that you are witnessing something that you can do better. And I'm just in celebration of that. The fact that you are 9 years old and you're willing to come to me with such an observation and care so much that you feel that you may have been disrespectful to someone, and that it matters enough to you that you would cry. I'm getting how important this is to you. Now let's work the shame out of it, so that it just becomes more like a scientific observation of, like, I did this, and I'm witness to a habit that still continues to come up. So I say, listen, our goal is to do our best to minimize these bad habits. And I'll tell you right now, as your dad at 56 years old, some of them are never going away.
Yeah.
And so it's, how do we manage them? How do we not have them create disruptions of drama in our life? How do we have them not harm others? Because I'm pretty sure there's a couple of bad habits I have that I'll probably keep until the day I die.
Yeah.
But as long as they're not now harming others and harming myself, I can live with those imperfections, and I can love myself through those imperfections. There's no perfect place to get to, except for just being the witness of what's real for you. That's what I've learned many years ago when I was doing the work. There was a process where I would have a self-discovery, and then it'd be like, now let me do all this work to try to fix that. And then I'd convince myself that I'd fixed it. And then 2 years later, I would do it again. And I'd be so upset that it almost like I was sober and I fell off the wagon. Like, I got to start over again. So it's this vicious cycle. Instead of just going, the seeing is the work, the awareness, and just see it. I don't have to declare it good or bad. I can just witness that I see that I have a path here that divides into two choices, and I took the lower path. Cool. Now let me get back on the higher path and keep going.
Yeah.
And it's just like less emotion, less emotional reaction to it, I think is something that I found that allows those habits to not cling on. It's almost like they cling on to the shame and they stay there. And so that's something that I'm in the process right now of making sure my boys understand that we all make mistakes and they're always going to make mistakes. And it is just being honest about them, recognizing them, and knowing that you have a choice. You can continue to make that mistake.
Yeah.
You can continue to do that over and over. That's your choice, your freedom to do that. But you have to then put your morals in order to say the outcome of this mistake leads here, and the outcome of this higher choice leads there. What matters most to me, the gratification in the moment, or knowing that I've just gone further away from my ultimate goal, and it's going to take me longer to get there now because I consciously chose to take the wrong path.
Yeah.
It's up to you, and that might actually be the path you need to take to learn a few things the hard way. As I've told my boys, I say, I'm trying my best to minimize the suffering in your life and the drama in your life.
Yeah.
But no one wants it all gone. You need to learn that. That's the stuff that gives you character and has you learn from experience. And so I don't want to rob you of your right to fail, of your right to make bad choices. I want to keep reminding you that there is always a choice. And then it's up to you on what choice you take. But never ever think you're in a position where you didn't have a choice. You always had a better choice.
Yeah.
And you understand the consequences of either choice. And now it's up to you. Now you have to live with the choice that you made, and it's I'll accept that, as long as you're not doing it so blind and naively that you end up in a place that you didn't even know was possible to be, like suddenly in a place of addiction. It's like I can point out to you along the way, these moves you're making lead you priming the mind in such a way that you will be open for addiction if that opportunity ever arises. So be careful.
Yeah.
But if you need to experience addiction for some reason and become sober and be one of those people that have to have that in your life, that's your path. I'm going to love you right through it.
What you just shared the last few minutes, I in 2 words, I would say intentional parenting. And I think that that level of intentionality and thoughtfulness probably is rare today. And I think that for all of us to walk away with, and I'd imagine if I talked to Nadia, she would say that Mikki is a very thoughtful, very intentional person in everything that he does. And I think that for all of us, for those of us, we're moving so fast, we're too busy, or we are reacting out of emotion to our kid. They do something, they catch us when we're frustrated, whatever. And I feel like the one of the takeaways for me from this conversation is with my kids is going to be slowing down, getting on their level, having real, thoughtful, non emotionally reactive, non triggered conversations, and also with my spouse, right? Taking the same approach that you have with your boys, and talking, with my spouse in the same way. And I think with the kids, what's great about it is you're saying, like, you're just laying out, you're not shaming them, which, with on David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, shame, I believe, is the lowest level of consciousness. It's what leads to addiction and suicide and also a host of bad choices. Like you said, when you're in shame, you're going to make that same decision again, because you don't feel worthy of a better decision.
That's right.
And so thank you, Mikki. Thank you for who you are, dude. Thank you for sharing who you are with me today and with everybody listening. I really, really appreciate it.
Do we have a couple more minutes, Hal?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
I
That's
did
how
this
our
last
last
time too.
conversation ended.
Exactly.
And I did
You
want
just
to, but
inspired.
I'll let you go where I want to ask you about your work here to close it out, so anybody that's not familiar can go and find that. So I'm just, so you know, I'm gonna make sure I put that end cap on it. But yeah, man, what do you want to talk about?
Thank you.
Whatever.
You just reminded me of something. I'm noticing my camera here I'm suddenly very tan, so I don't know what that is. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to. Okay. Anyway, the one big, huge lesson that I've learned that I want to pass on to other parents, particularly to fathers.
Okay.
When we had our first boy, we were very immersed in what I now would I classify as the new age world.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
self-help new age world. I was filming a lot of it. That was a big part of my job. And so we were reading the conscious, you said intentional parenting, and that's what triggered this for me.
Mm.
We were reading the conscious parenting books.
I have that book. Yeah.
And there's a lot of great stuff in these books, and a lot of not so great stuff in these books,
Mm.
because what happened was, as my boy was about 4 years old, and so my second boy was 2 at the time, I started to recognize, and a lot of it came through my son had another 4-year-old little friend, and they were best buddies. And we became friends with the mother and father of this child.
Mm.
And they were also doing the conscious parenting thing. And I was living in a very Ojai, California, the conscious capital, the woo-woo capital of California.
Yeah.
And so everybody kind of had the same language, and it was we reached a point where it was getting tough. Like, we didn't really go through terrible twos. We chose to call them terrific twos, because we just
Nice.
said, I'm not going to buy into that.
We're not playing that game.
But,
Yeah.
but 4 years came along, and I'm like, okay, hold on. This is kind of how they describe terrible twos. Like this kid's running our life. And then I'd
Mhm.
notice when we'd be out with the other friend, we'd be out to dinner, 20 minutes into it, and they would say their boy would start to act up, and they'd say, guys, we're so sorry. It's just he's really sensitive, and we, he's not having a good day here, so we're just going to get our stuff to go, and thank you so much. And they just leave in the middle of like their only date night in 3 months.
Mm.
And they'd leave, and Nadia and I would just go, wow, that kid has control over them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I started noticing, well, there's a degree of that in our family too. There's times when this little person is calling the shots.
Yeah.
And I was getting frustrated as a dad. So I was trying really hard. It was just, no matter what they did, like this one particular child that I was talking about would hit their father. I see you're angry, you're hitting daddy, and whatever. And I'm like, wow, is that? I don't know. Is that okay? Is that how? That's conscious, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I noticed was, we reached a point, and one day I just lost it. And my son was collecting little monster trucks, little, and he did something. I said, don't do it again, whatever. And he did it to test me.
Mm.
And I took his monster truck collection, I put it in the sink, I took a hammer, and I broke him, and I made him throw them away. And I said, things are about to change around here. You're not going to treat me that way and treat your mother that way. And part of it was triggered by, I had watched this documentary of a guy that was a horse whisperer. It was a beautiful documentary. And he would encounter these wild Mustangs. And these Mustangs were like, you're not getting anywhere near me, dude. And in 10 minutes, he would have the Mustang bowing, and he'd be on it bareback riding that Mustang. Mm. And I was so moved by witnessing this process. And I could also recognize, like, there's something changed within that Mustang. It's almost as if they felt that the entire world was predators, and their life was just to survive. And everything more powerful than it wanted to kill it. And now they had an alpha. And it almost was like you could feel this horse going, oh, something more powerful in me that actually doesn't want to kill me. Mm. Like I feel safer than I've ever felt. Like, yeah. I could feel that. And so I thought, our kids hear us. They hear what's going on. They hear us listening to the news. They know that there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. They don't feel safe. And when you don't feel safe, and you don't feel that you have someone to protect you when you're vulnerable at a young age, you develop ego. You put this suit of armor on, because now you want to. That's why you have so many kids that are from Beverly Hills, but they're like, oh yeah, and they have all this attitude, like they're tough because they want to seem scary, because they're scared. They don't feel safe. And so when I had that moment, and it shocked my son, because I'd never done anything like that, I said, now you go throw them away, and don't you ever disrespect me again. Don't you ever talk to your mother that way again. That's not what men do, and that is not the way. And I started to be stronger.
Mm.
with my boys. And the next time we were with his little friend, friend was in the back seat. He started to act up. And I kept saying over and over, please stop. We don't scream in the car. We don't do that. We don't kick the back of the seat. We don't, nothing I said mattered to this kid. He'd never been disciplined. Finally, I pulled the car over and I turned around and I was fiery in the face. And I told him. And then when we're driving away, my son goes, my dad isn't like your dad. Don't ever do that again. Right. And I heard him telling him that, right?
My dad isn't like your dad.
Yeah. And I'm listening. I'm trying not to laugh out loud. But what's funny is from that moment on, my relationship with that child, we became so close.
Once you set a boundary, once you stood in your power.
He wanted to sit on my lap. We would go to a movie and he'd be fighting over with one of my sons to sit on my lap. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Like, he needs to feel secure. I'm the first man in his life. First, like his father was so passive. And so it taught me. And then so I realized, I said, we have this thing within this conscious community trying their best to raise their children in a different way, because they understand that there have been a lot of things that have happened in our past where people have behaved so horribly. We want to raise the next generation to be more compassionate and caring and conscious. We get it. I get it. But it's gone too far. It's gone so far that our children don't feel safe now. And even to the point of where I have friends who want to step out as men, but they're like, my wife won't let me. She thinks it's cruel. She won't let me raise my voice. She won't let me discipline. She won't let me. It's like, so the calling really is to men and women out there. We have a primal role. And it is not, the father isn't just the hunter-gatherer and the provider, not just the warrior. He's also the nurturer. And the mother isn't also just the nurturer. She's also the warrior. She's also the hunter, the gatherer. We have our different roles that we play, but if we prohibit each other from fulfilling their roles, our children will suffer. And so thankfully, I have an incredible wife that trusts me. And when I started to change, it was funny because, later I said, I think I'm becoming a Republican dad because I've been a liberal my whole life. And I said, that's a Republican dad in me, because I'm like, I draw the boundary.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the stronger I got with my kids, like my kids don't mess with me. They don't, I mean, mess with me. Like they don't disrespect.
They respect you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And they show really true respect, not just in my presence, but people tell me when they're on sleepovers or whatever, how they talk about me and their mother. It's like really respectful. They have a lot of respect for you too. And part of it is because I realize we're raising a fragile generation at the time in the world where they need to be their strongest.
Yeah.
And so all this talk that we give, he's sensitive, she's sensitive, all this, it's like, we have to really reevaluate that, because the more that we tell our kids that they're fragile, I tell my kids all the time, you're capable of so much more. You can see that, hear that, be around that, and for it not to affect you at all. And it's understanding this one last thing is that the first line of communication, the first tool of communication that we learn is as brand new infants. We cry, we have hunger pains, we cry, we get milk. And then 2 hours later, we cry, we get milk. So we start to go, wow, I make this sound, I get soothed. And so we grow up, and some of us never stop manipulating through emotions.
Sure.
And so we have a 0 whine policy, not a do not cry. Because I told my boys a long time ago, you're going to hear this crap about boys don't cry. Wrong. Real men cry. It's a powerful expression, but it should never be overused or used to manipulate, ever. And so we call it the proper use of tears. So when my kids come to me and they're whining because they didn't get what they want, I say, no, come on back later. Give it a try later. When you lose that whine, I'm ready to hear you. And then they'll come back. Okay, here's the deal. I say, use your words, just your words. Let's negotiate, but use your words. We don't allow any whining. Even when their friends come over, they'll tell my friends, they'll be like, no whining in this house.
We're in no whine zone.
We don't communicate like that. And so, but the more I stepped up is the point. The stronger I got with them, the safer they got. My relationship with my kids just continues to get closer and closer every day with deep respect, because I also don't misuse my power with them. And a couple of times I have, and I've had to go up to the room and say, listen, that was an overreaction. That had nothing to do with you. That was all daddy. I'm having a tough day.
Mm.
You got in my way. That had nothing to do with you, buddy. I am so sorry. And is there anything you need to say to me or anything that needs to happen for you to feel complete and understanding that that was me and not you? And then we'll talk about it. And I'll say, yeah, it really made me feel this way. And I was confused, because I didn't think I did anything wrong, but you told me I did. And I say, yep, you're 100% right. And so they also understand that I make mistakes too.
Sure.
And so I've invited them that anytime, maybe I this time I was aware of my mistake, but sometimes I may not be aware. So I don't want you to just listen to me because I am father and authority. If you think the punishment was out of proportion or anything like that, come back to me and negotiate with me. Tell me. And they will. They'll say, hey, Dad, I think what happened, I think you took our iPad away for a week is really unfair because here's what actually happened. We weren't on for an hour and 20 minutes. We were really an hour of game time, but we had internet issues and it took us 20 minutes to get on. Awesome. Thank you for explaining that. Is that right, Zuri? Say, yes, that's right. Okay. I withdraw my judgment of that, and you guys can have your 20 minutes back. Here you go. Thank you. Good job. Matter of fact, negotiating that.
Yeah. That's empowerment right there. You're empowering
It's
them.
empowerment. Yeah. So, the point being is like, we have a primal role to play, and let's not, as mates, let's not stop the mothers from fulfilling that role. Let's not stop the fathers, and understand that our children need to feel safe because when a 4-year-old or whatever age, they want to manipulate you. They want to get what they want because they had that first experience of getting the milk. So they know if I just whine and make a fit in this restaurant, they're going to leave because I want to leave, whatever it is. But what happens to them ultimately is unconsciously or subconsciously, they have a thought of, if I have more power than these two people who brought me into this world,
wow,
who has my back? And that's when the development of ego and the armor starts to be built because they now feel like there's no one bigger than them. So they need to create some way to be safe in the world. And so it's actually to their benefit for us to be stronger.
To step into our masculine, right?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Men and women equal, but different, right? Different strengths, different energies, different, the masculine and feminine, I think, to your point that our society has tried to, labeling it toxic masculinity and the feminist movement and trying to kind of equal, we're all the same. It's like, no, we're equal, but,
that's right.
But different.
Very different.
Yeah. And I found, I went through something similar. I'm naturally not a hyper masculine man, right? Like in terms of just my energy as much, I'm very, very thoughtful and kind and careful, and similarly, a few years ago, I realized that. And then my wife kept having to Ursula would have to step into her masculine because I wasn't. And so I wasn't allowing her to be in her feminine because I wasn't playing my part. I wasn't stepping up the way that I needed to. And so I know last time we talked, you kind of mentioned it the same way, that you were more in your feminine for a long time. And then when you stepped in your masculine, which is what you just described, that it improved your relationships, it improved your authority in a very healthy way. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. In fact, that was on my notes. I wrote bringing masculinity into fatherhood. So actually, I skipped over that on accident. I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Awesome.
I do want to make sure that for anyone, and we could have spent the entire time talking about your films and your work because I'm probably one of your biggest fans. I want to say this for anyone that doesn't know, and I'll probably mention this in the introduction so that people have this context, but you created the most censored, controversial, and yet the most watched films in human history, being the Plandemic series, Plandemic 1, Plandemic 2, Plandemic 3. I believe I saw Plandemic 2 before 1, I think. If I'm not, I might be mistaken, but a good friend of mine sent it to me. And I honestly, at that place in my life, it was like 2020. And I'm like, dude, this is like I think I was like 2 minutes in. This is a conspiracy theory movie. What is this? Right. And he goes, dude, just trust me. Watch the whole thing and then call me. And it was Plandemic 2 because I remember watching it and I'm like, this is virtually bulletproof in terms of while the media could label this as, oh, don't trust that. It's a conspiracy theory. And, like anybody that tells the truth, they're smeared. Right. But when I watched the whole thing, I sent it to my mom and my dad and my sister and all of my best friends. And, I just said, watch this whole thing, suspend any judgment until you're done. It will open your eyes to what is going on that you're not being shown. And again, you are an investigative filmmaker. Just a few weeks ago, you debuted the third installment in the Plandemic series, The Great Awakening. And in my opinion, the best of the three films. It just got better and better and better. My wife was there live, as were I. Sent a handful of people. I was in Dallas giving a keynote, so I was watching it live on the live stream from my hotel room that night. But it's just a phenomenal film. And I know we don't have time to go into the depth. I want to ask where people, please, if you trust me at all, if you trust Mikki after hearing his heart and mind over the last hour, I'm encouraging you, go watch this film. It is called The Great Awakening. And Mikki, where can people watch the film?
All of my films are totally free and available at plandemicseries.com. Even my book by the same title, Plandemic, is on that same site for free. Download it; it's all yours. People
Damn
ask me all the time.
I'm looking at 2 copies I paid for full price on Amazon.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, no, keep going.
Well, that was the deal I made with my publisher was when they approached me to do a book deal. I said I don't really have any desire to write a book or anything like that. But if I do, here's my deal, and that is, once you've made your money back, 'cause I know it costs money to print and
Sure.
distribute a book. Once you've made your money back, your initial investment, then we give it away. And Skyhorse Publishing took a big chance, and they don't regret it. They actually say it really brought them a lot of positive press, and now they're doing it with other authors. And the reason is this: not that I think everything should be free, and not that I have a problem with people generating income and having a good life and having things. It's that this information has been stolen from the people, and this information will help people better guide their lives. And so for me, my metaphor is I feel like I'm the guy who discovered, like, if all of your house was robbed, and I went and I knew where the stuff was in some storage container, and I went and I loaded it up, all your stuff, and I pulled it up to your front door, and I go, okay, Hal, how much you want to give me for it? Like, I'm going to sell your stuff back to you. Like, this belongs to the people. It was stolen from them. And so I just made a commitment early on that it's like, I'm not going to profit from the Plandemic series. I do have an immune restoring formula that is one of the best on the planet, if not the best. Take my word on that.
Fierce immunity. I take that on a regular basis.
Yes, you do. My partner is JP Sears on that, and we have had this developed by 2 of the greatest formulators on the planet. Because we know that we have a lot of compromised and damaged immune systems out there. And so we developed something to help us restore natural immunity, because we know that this is the time for humanity to step up and to take on this big challenge. And nobody can do that if they're not feeling well. And so that's my only revenue model I have in my life right now. I have decided just within the last week that there will be a Plandemic 4.
Really?
So oh yeah. So the next year of my life will be spent doing work that doesn't receive any kind of income, as I've been doing for the past 3 years. And my wife's the one to say, our nest egg is gone. How long do you plan on doing this? But by the grace of God, we've everything that we need shows up when we need it. And I think that's what happens when you are. It took me a long time. I thought I was in service years ago. I was really trying my hard to be of service, but there was a lot of me in it. I didn't realize that there was a lot of me trying to, do something good and to be known for doing something good.
Yeah, sure.
And now the more I try to take myself out of it, it's just a weird dichotomy of how it's the more credit I get and the more abundance I get, the more I try not to make money, the more people donate for my next film. And so it's just been this incredible learning of what the goodness of people, of if you treat people with respect and you're generous with them, it is the people that made Plandemic series the most seen independent film series in history, because the censors were all there to shut us
It was
down.
word
But
of mouth. There was no advertising allowed.
totally, totally. And
Yeah.
so, I owe it to the people for making this series so well known, because it was the people who took the file. We said, listen, don't just watch it on our website, because
Yep.
our website will be zapped.
Yep.
Download the file, upload it to your own computer, and share it on your own sites. And these days, when so many people have, businesses online, traffic is a commodity for them. It's a currency. And so people are like, yeah, this is great. I get to share a viral film and I get to keep all the traffic and all the, and I said, absolutely. And we've been offered a lot of money
Yeah.
for the Plandemic series. And we continue to say no. I have one on the table right now, a very well-known company that wants to, they just can't, it's so funny every time, because they just can't get how they're like, what's the licensing fee or deal? And I'm like, zero.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, but no, we have to have some
What's it
kind of
going to take?
exchange of, and it's like, I won't take a dollar. I won't take a dollar. So anyway, it's all at plandemicseries.com. There is a donation button if anyone wants to donate to this next film. I can't reveal what it's about yet, but it, as you said, I'm really proud that the films have gotten better each time, and I guarantee you this will be the biggest one.
I'm excited because they have. Yeah, I mean, you level up, and I will say, and I'm not saying this in any way for credit. I just want people listening to know. I was at the I don't know what it was called, but it was some sort of, it was a fundraising event for Plandemic 3. I went, you showed us the trailer, you showed us early footage, and I donated $5,000.
Yeah.
Like I believe in you. I believe in your work. I believe in your mission. I have watched your films. I have shared your films. They have made an impact in my life. And to me, Plandemic 2 and 3 especially, those are must watch films. And I'd start with 3, The Great Awakening. And I just want to read, I literally wrote this down word for word the other day. Your new film, The Great Awakening, opens with a scene of you at a rally, a freedom rally. And this is your word for word what you said. You said, whatever political party you identify with, you are welcome here. Whatever color, culture, or creed you identify with, you are welcome here. If you are vaccinated or unvaccinated, you are welcome here. And you went on to talk about that freedom is worth fighting for. We are worth fighting for. Your kids are worth fighting for. And Mikki Willis, thank you for fighting for all of us, for humanity. You've been doing it for decades, man. And I love you and I appreciate you for it.
Thank you, Hal. I love you too. And please give your family a big hug from me.
I will. They're waiting for me. They got dinner ready. All right, man. I love you. Everybody listening, go to plandemicseries.com. Check out Mikki's films. They are all free, and they will open your mind and blow your mind at the same time. And all right, love you all. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks.